You don't need to arrive here feeling calm. You don't need to clear your thoughts or slow your breathing or make today feel finished. If your mind feels cluttered, if it feels full of half-formed thoughts and quiet tension, this story is already meant for you. There are nights when the room is quiet, yet the mind feels busy. Not busy in a productive way, but busy in the way that comes from holding too many small things at once. Unfinished conversations, moments that keep replaying, thoughts that do not ask for attention yet continue to stay. Tonight is not about sorting them. It is not about understanding where they came from or deciding what to keep or choosing what to let go of. You are not here to fix anything, and you are not here to improve the way this night feels. You are here because something inside you is tired of holding, tired of evaluating every thought, tired of deciding whether today was good enough or meaningful enough or complete enough. And you do not need to resolve that tiredness. You only need to notice it. For a moment, allow this space to be exactly as it is, the room around you, the weight of your body, the way your thoughts move without asking permission. There is nothing in this moment that requires effort, nothing that asks you to perform calmness or create silence or reach for a better state of mind. Even the wish to rest can simply be present without being acted upon. If thoughts continue to move, let them move. If they slow down, let them slow down. There's no correct rhythm for this night. You may notice that the mind has a habit of organizing everything it touches, labeling, comparing, deciding what matters and what does not. This story does not ask the mind to stop doing that. It only offers a place where those movements do not need to be followed. You can listen without listening closely. You can drift without trying to drift. The voice can remain in the background, like a light in another room, present but not demanding attention. There is nothing hidden here that you might miss. Nothing important that requires you to stay awake. If your attention wanders, that is part of the rhythm of this night. You may already feel the subtle sense that nothing needs to be completed before rest can arrive, that even a cluttered mind is allowed to rest, that even unfinished thoughts are permitted to soften. For now, simply remain. Let the body stay where it is. Let the mind do whatever it does without needing direction. This story will continue gently at its own pace, and you are free to rest alongside it without effort, without judgment, and without the need to arrive anywhere else. The mind does not become cluttered all at once. It happens quietly over time, through small moments that seem harmless on their own. A thought appears and the mind responds, not by rejecting it, but by holding it, by keeping it nearby, just in case it matters later. Another thought follows, then another. And without noticing the moment it happens, the mind begins to carry more than it needs. Most of this clutter is not made of big worries. It is made of small, unfinished things. Questions that were never asked out loud. Feelings that were acknowledged, but not released. Moments that passed too quickly to be understood, yet stayed long enough to leave a trace. The mind has a habit of treating these traces as responsibilities, as if every thought needs a conclusion, as if every feeling requires a final decision, and so the mind stays slightly alert, not anxious, not fully awake, but never completely at rest. You may notice how this feels in the body, a quiet tightness, a sense of holding, even when nothing is physically being held. The body remains still, yet something inside stays prepared. This is not because you have done anything wrong. It is simply the way the mind learned to protect you by staying engaged, by staying ready, by keeping track of what might matter. Over time, this readiness begins to feel like weight, not a sharp pressure, but a steady presence, something that does not demand attention, yet never fully leaves. The mind then begins to organize this weight, labeling thoughts as useful or unnecessary, deciding which memories deserve more space, comparing today to other days, quietly measuring whether enough was done or felt or understood. This organizing does not bring relief. It only rearranges the clutter, and because the mind is skilled at this, it keeps doing it, even at night, even when the body is ready to rest. You might notice that some thoughts return simply because they were never given permission to stop, not because they are important, but because they were noticed once and then noticed again. Attention becomes attachment without intention. This story does not ask you to interrupt that process. It does not ask you to push thoughts away or to replace them with better ones. It only invites you to see how gently this clutter formed. There's no urgency here, no problem that needs to be solved before sleep can arrive. For now, it is enough to recognize that the mind has been working for a long time, carrying, tracking, responding, and that even this cluttered state is not an obstacle to rest. It is simply the place where rest begins. The story will continue slowly from here, staying close to this quiet understanding without asking the mind to change its habits or to let go before it is ready. Sometimes the mind continues to hold things simply because it has not been told that it is allowed to stop, not in words, but in feeling. There was never a clear moment when the day ended, or when the mind was gently released from its role, and so it remains slightly open, like a hand that has been holding something for so long that it forgets how to rest. You may notice that the thoughts returning now are not urgent. They are not asking for action. They are not demanding answers. They simply appear, linger for a moment, and then shift into another shape. This movement is familiar. It has happened on many nights before. The mind moving from one unfinished edge to another, not because it wants to disturb rest, but because it does not know that rest is already possible. There is often a belief that clarity must come before sleep, that the mind needs to be sorted, settled, or resolved in some way. But the mind did not become cluttered because clarity was missing. It became cluttered because it cared, because it noticed, because it responded, because it stayed close to experience instead of turning away. Even now, this caring continues quietly, the mind checking in, revisiting moments, making sure nothing important has been lost. This is not something to correct. It is simply something to observe. As you remain here, you may sense that the weight carried by the mind does not change when you think about it. It changes when it is no longer being carried forward, not dropped, not released, just no longer moved. There is a difference between holding something and allowing it to rest where it is. The thoughts do not need to disappear. They only need to stop being transported from moment to moment. You might feel this shift as a subtle pause, a small space between one thought and the next. not silence, but less momentum. The body often recognizes this before the mind does. A slight softening, a sense of being supported by the surface beneath you, a quiet permission to remain still. Nothing about this moment requires understanding. The mind can continue its patterns if it wishes. It does not need to be convinced. This story is not leading the mind toward emptiness. It is simply allowing the mind to notice that it does not need to stay in motion in order to be safe. There is no finish line here, no final realization waiting at the end of this section, only the gradual recognition that the clutter was never a mistake and never a barrier. It was simply the trace of attention left behind by a mind that has been engaged for a long time. From here, the story will move gently forward, not toward solutions, but toward a quieter way of being with what is already present. And you are welcome to follow it or to drift alongside it at your own pace. There is often a quiet assumption that rest comes after letting go, that sleep waits on the other side of release, as if something must be loosened first before the body is allowed to settle. But the effort to let go can become another form of holding, another task for the mind to manage, another expectation layered on top of an already tired night. You may notice this when the thought appears, I should relax now. The moment it appears, the mind leans forward, watching itself, checking whether it is doing it correctly. This story does not ask for that kind of effort. There is no instruction here to release thoughts or empty the mind or soften the body on purpose. Those intentions, however gentle they sound, still ask the mind to perform. Tonight is different. Here, nothing is required to move away. Thoughts can remain exactly where they are. Feelings can keep their shape. Even tension is allowed to stay without being negotiated with. You are not being guided toward letting go. You are being invited to notice that nothing is actually being held. Often, what feels like holding is simply attention staying too close, hovering, following each thought as it changes form, carrying it forward, moment by moment. When attention pauses, even briefly, something shifts on its own. Not because you made it shift, but because there was nothing holding it in motion anymore. You may notice that the mind does not resist this idea. It simply listens, and in listening, it rests without realizing it is resting. There is a difference between letting go and no longer continuing. Letting go sounds active. No longer continuing sounds like something that happens when effort fades. This fading does not need encouragement. It happens naturally when nothing interrupts it. The body understands this deeply. It does not need permission to become heavy. It only needs the absence of urgency. You might feel this as a slow settling, not sinking, not collapsing, just a gradual agreement between your body and the surface beneath you. The mind may still comment on this. It may name it or question it or attempt to measure it. That is fine. Even that commentary does not stop rest from arriving. Nothing here needs to be completed. You are not moving toward a better state. You are simply staying with the state that is already here long enough for its edges to soften. There is no correct pace, no moment when you must notice something important. If attention drifts, it drifts. If it stays, it stays. Both are welcome. This section does not end with release. It ends with permission. Permission for everything to remain as it is without being carried forward. From here, the story will continue into a quieter space where effort becomes less relevant, and where even the idea of letting go begins to feel unnecessary. You do not need to follow that movement closely. You can simply remain here, allowing the voice to move ahead while you rest where you are. Sometimes the idea of letting go feels heavy because it is imagined as a loss, as if something important might disappear if attention loosens even slightly. The mind hesitates, not out of resistance, but out of care. It is used to staying close, to monitoring, to making sure nothing essential slips away unnoticed. This vigilance has been practiced for a long time, long enough to feel natural, long enough to feel necessary, and yet there are moments when the mind rests without planning to. Small moments, a pause between breaths, a few seconds when attention drifts and nothing is lost. These moments happen without instruction, without effort. They arrive quietly and pass just as quietly. This is what this story stays close to. Not the idea of release, but the recognition that rest has already visited you many times before. You may notice that when attention softens, thoughts do not collapse or scatter. They simply stop asking to be carried forward. They remain where they are without needing escort. There is no force involved in this, no decision that needs to be made. It is not an action, but a pause in action. The mind often believes that pausing means falling behind, that something will be missed. But in these moments of pause, nothing essential is ever lost. Even now, as you listen, the mind may be testing this space, briefly leaning in, then leaning back. This movement does not need correction. It is part of the process of recognizing that effort is optional. You are not practicing a technique. You are not learning a method. You are simply allowing the night to unfold without adding instructions to it. The voice continues, but it does not require your attention. It can remain present like a sound in the distance, heard but not followed. If you notice moments when the words blur together or when meaning fades slightly, that is not a problem. That is often where rest begins. There is no need to return attention to the voice. There is no need to stay with the story. This space is not fragile. It does not collapse when attention wanders. It remains available, even when it is not noticed. You may begin to sense that nothing is waiting for you to do, no task left unfinished, no inner signal that must be answered before rest is allowed. This is not a state you need to hold on to. Even holding on to rest creates tension. Instead, allow the night to carry itself forward, without guidance, without effort. From here, the story will move gently toward a way of seeing where nothing needs to be released, because nothing was ever being held. You are free to follow that movement or to drift away from it, resting in the space that is already here. There are times when nothing around you changes, and yet the weight of the moment feels different. The room is the same. The night is the same. Even the thoughts may still be present, and still something feels less tight. This shift does not come from fixing anything. It does not come from understanding more or doing something better, or finally arriving at a clear conclusion. It comes quietly, often without being noticed at first. The mind is used to thinking that change must look like movement, that something must be added, removed, or rearranged. But there is another kind of change that happens without visible motion, a change in how close attention stands to experience, a change in how tightly meaning is held. You may notice this when a thought appears and instead of being pulled into it, you remain slightly behind it, not pushing it away, not following it, simply allowing it to exist at a small distance. Nothing about the thought itself is different, only the way it is being seen. In this space, thoughts lose some of their urgency, not because they were answered, but because they are no longer being leaned into. They are allowed to pass through awareness without being carried forward. This is not detachment. It is not distance created by effort. It is a natural widening, the way vision softens when it stops trying to focus on a single point. The body often responds to this widening before the mind does. A subtle ease in the shoulders, a sense that breathing no longer needs guidance, a quiet agreement between inside and outside. Nothing has been solved. Nothing has been completed, and yet the night feels more open. The mind may notice this and try to understand it. It may name it or question it or wonder how to make it last. That is all right. Even this curiosity does not close the space, because this space does not depend on effort. It does not need to be protected. You may sense that meaning itself has become lighter, that thoughts are still thoughts, but they do not carry the same weight they did before. They are sounds, movements, impressions, rather than instructions. This does not require belief. You do not need to agree with it. You only need to allow it to be noticed. There are moments when the mind sees clearly without trying to see. Moments when understanding happens without explanation. These moments do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly and leave quietly. This section does not ask you to stay in that space. It does not ask you to maintain it or deepen it. It simply stays nearby, long enough for the body to recognize that nothing needs to be held in place. The night continues to move forward, whether attention follows it or not. You do not need to keep up with the story. You do not need to remember what was said. If everything remains the same, that is fine. If everything feels slightly lighter, that is fine too. From here, the story will continue into a gentler quiet, where judgments begin to soften on their own, and where the need to decide anything at all slowly fades into the background. You are free to remain here or to drift ahead, resting in the space where nothing has changed and nothing needs to. As this lighter way of seeing settles, you may notice that judgment begins to loosen without being addressed directly, not because you decided to stop judging, but because judgment no longer finds a place to stand. Thoughts still appear, but they arrive without the same demand. They no longer insist on agreement or resistance. They pass through awareness like weather, present for a moment, then already moving on. The mind is often surprised by this. It expects effort to be involved. It expects a clear action, a choice, a turning point. But what is happening here is quieter than that. It is the recognition that meaning does not need to be applied to every experience, that not every sensation, memory, or thought needs to be interpreted. Some things can simply be noticed and then allowed to fade. In this space, the idea of before and after becomes less important. There is no moment where you can say, this is when it changed. There is only a gradual easing, like tension leaving the body without being traced back to its source. The body continues to respond to this ease. Muscles that were not consciously tight begin to soften. Breathing finds its own rhythm without needing to be slowed or guided. The mind may still reach for explanation. That habit does not disappear, but explanation itself begins to feel unnecessary. You might sense that the night does not require interpretation. That rest does not depend on understanding why the mind feels the way it does. It depends only on allowing experience to remain unfinished. Unfinished does not mean unresolved. It means open. It means free from the pressure to conclude. This openness is not something to hold on to. Like everything else in this story, it does not need to be preserved. It is enough that it appears, even briefly. You may notice moments where awareness feels wider than the thoughts within it, where thoughts appear inside a larger quiet rather than filling the entire space. This is not a special state. It is simply what happens when attention stops leaning forward. Nothing about this needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be carried into tomorrow. The night is complete on its own terms. As this section comes to rest, the story will continue moving toward an even softer quiet, a place where decisions lose their urgency and where the mind no longer feels responsible for shaping the moment. You are not being led somewhere. You are simply being accompanied as the night continues to unfold in its own way. As the night deepens, you may notice that the need to decide begins to soften, not because decisions were made, but because they no longer feel urgent. The mind spends much of its time choosing what matters, choosing what to remember, choosing what to return to later. Even small moments are quietly evaluated. Was this enough? Was that right? Did something important happen, or was it missed? Tonight does not require those answers. You may sense that the questions are still there, but they no longer ask to be completed. They linger briefly, then lose interest, as if realizing that nothing depends on them right now. This is not confusion. It is rest from responsibility. There is a difference between not knowing and not needing to know. Not knowing can feel tense. Not needing to know feels spacious. As judgment loosens, experience becomes simpler, not clearer, not brighter, just less crowded. Sensations remain sensations. Thoughts remain thoughts, but they no longer demand interpretation. The body understands this kind of simplicity instinctively. It does not wait for permission to become still. It responds to the absence of demand. You may notice that time itself begins to feel less structured. Moments are no longer lined up, waiting to be assessed. They arrive, remain briefly, and then dissolve into the next. There is no need to keep track. The mind might attempt to re-engage, to check whether this is working or whether something important is being overlooked. That is natural. That habit has been practiced for a long time, but even this checking does not need to be followed. It can appear and then fade without consequence. Nothing in this space requires agreement. You do not need to believe anything that is being said. You do not need to adopt a new way of thinking. This section is not offering a conclusion. It is offering relief from the need for one. You may begin to feel that rest does not come from having fewer thoughts. It comes from having fewer demands placed on them. Thoughts can exist without instructions. Feelings can exist without explanation. Even uncertainty can exist without tension. This is not a state to maintain. It does not need to be held in place. Like everything else tonight, it is allowed to pass through naturally. If attention drifts away from the voice, that is welcome. If it returns, that is welcome too. Neither movement interrupts rest. As this section settles, the story will continue moving toward an even quieter place. A place where judgment has little to do, and where the night no longer asks anything of you. You are free to remain exactly as you are. No decisions required, no conclusions needed. As the sense of decision continues to soften, you may notice that even preferences begin to lose their urgency. The quiet habit of liking and disliking, agreeing and disagreeing fades into the background. Nothing needs to be chosen in this moment. Nothing needs to be arranged or prioritized. Experience can remain exactly as it arrives without being sorted. The mind often believes that order brings safety, that knowing where things stand makes rest possible. But tonight, safety comes from the absence of demands. You may notice that when nothing is required, attention naturally widens. It no longer fixes itself on a single thought or feeling. It allows everything to exist without needing to define it. This widening is not something you do. It is something that happens when effort steps aside. The body often responds by becoming heavier, not heavy in a burdensome way, but in the way that comes from being fully supported. The surface beneath you does more of the work. There may be moments when awareness feels diffuse, less focused, more spread out. This is not distraction, it is rest taking shape. Even sounds may begin to blend together, the voice, the quiet of the room, the subtle rhythm of your breathing. Nothing needs to be separated, nothing needs to stand out. If a thought appears asking whether this is the right way to rest, it can be allowed to pass without reply. There is no wrong way to be here. You may notice that the night no longer feels like something you are moving through. It feels like something that is holding you. Time loses its edges. Moments are no longer counted. They simply unfold, one after another, without needing to be marked. There is no need to stay awake for any particular part of this story. There is no message hidden ahead that you might miss. This section does not ask for attention. It does not ask for understanding. It only remains present long enough for the mind to recognize that it does not need to manage the night. As this added space settles, the story will continue toward an even quieter depth. A place where nothing needs to be improved and where rest does not depend on effort or awareness. You are free to drift further or to remain exactly where you are. Either way, the night continues gently, carrying everything it needs without your help. As the night continues to deepen, you may notice that the urge to add something begins to fade. Not only the urge to think more, but the quieter urge to improve the moment, to make it softer, calmer, or more complete. For much of the day, the mind is trained to add meaning, to add explanation, to add intention. Even rest is often treated as something to be created, something that arrives only after the right conditions are met. But tonight there is nothing missing. You do not need to add calm to the moment. You do not need to add silence to the mind. You do not need to add comfort to the body. Everything that is here is already enough for rest to happen. You may notice that when nothing is being added, nothing needs to be held in place either. Experience becomes simpler, not because it has been reduced, but because it is no longer being adjusted. Thoughts may still appear, sensations may still shift, but they do so without asking to be shaped. The body understands this deeply. It does not wait for conditions to be perfect. It rests when it is no longer being asked to participate. You might feel this as a gentle heaviness, a sense of being fully supported without needing to settle yourself deliberately. The surface beneath you carries more, and you carry less. Breathing continues on its own, not guided, not corrected, simply moving at the pace that belongs to it. The mind may notice this and briefly try to name it, to label the experience as calm or ease or rest. That is fine. Even naming does not disturb what is already happening, because nothing here depends on recognition. There is no moment in this section where something new is introduced, no insight that must be understood, no shift that needs to be noticed. The story remains intentionally plain, like a quiet landscape that does not invite exploration, only presence. If attention fades, it fades. If it drifts in and out, that movement is welcome. Nothing is lost when the story becomes background. You may begin to sense that rest is not an achievement. It is not the result of doing something correctly. It is simply what remains when nothing is being added. The night does not ask you to deepen this feeling. It does not ask you to stay here. Like everything else, it is allowed to come and go. As this section settles, the story will move even further into quiet, toward a place where sound matters more than meaning, and where listening itself begins to soften. You do not need to follow that movement. You can remain exactly where you are, resting in the completeness of this moment without adding anything at all. When nothing is being added, the night begins to feel self-sustaining, as if it knows how to hold itself without guidance or adjustment. You may notice that effort has quietly stepped aside, not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually enough that it no longer needs to be named. There is a simplicity in this, not the simplicity of emptiness, but the simplicity of completeness. Everything that needs to be present already is. The mind often tries to return to improvement, to wonder whether the moment could be deeper, quieter, more settled. But even that wondering does not disturb the stillness that has begun to form, because stillness here is not fragile. It does not break when attention shifts. It does not disappear when a thought passes through. You may feel that the body no longer waits for instruction. It rests in its own timing. Muscles soften without being asked. Weight distributes itself naturally. Breathing continues, not as a technique, but as a background rhythm, sometimes noticed, sometimes not, always allowed. There is no need to stay aware of any particular sensation. Awareness itself can soften, becoming less pointed, more diffuse. This is often where the edges of experience begin to blur, where moments are no longer clearly separated, where time feels less like a sequence and more like a gentle flow. Nothing needs to be held onto here, not this feeling, not this quiet, not even this sense of rest. Holding would only add effort back into the moment. Instead, allow the night to continue unfolding on its own, without commentary, without direction. The story remains present, but it does not require participation. It can be heard as sound without meaning, as rhythm without instruction. If sleep arrives, it arrives. If it does not, nothing has failed. Rest is already happening in its own form. You do not need to remember these words. You do not need to carry anything forward. This space is complete exactly as it is. No additions needed. No adjustments required. As this section slowly comes to rest, the story will continue moving toward a place where words themselves begin to dissolve into sound and where listening becomes effortless. You are free to follow that movement or to drift gently away from it, resting in the fullness of a moment that asks nothing more. As the night settles further, words begin to lose their edges, not disappearing but softening, as if they no longer need to hold their shape so firmly. You may notice that meaning matters less now, that sentences can pass through without being followed, that the sound of the voice carries more weight than the ideas it forms. This is a natural movement. Nothing has gone wrong. The mind is not drifting away from the story. It is resting alongside it. Listening no longer needs to be active. You do not need to stay with the words. They can arrive, overlap, blur slightly, and move on. At this point, the voice can become part of the night, like the quiet presence of something steady and familiar, heard but not tracked. You may notice moments where you are not sure what was just said. There is no need to go back. Nothing important depends on understanding. The body often responds by becoming even heavier, not pulled downward, but fully received by the surface beneath you, supported without effort. Breathing continues somewhere in the background, sometimes close, sometimes far away, always moving on its own. Thoughts may still appear, but they no longer form a clear line. They arrive as fragments, images, loose impressions. This is not confusion. It is the mind letting go of structure. There is no need to gather these impressions, no need to connect them. They do not need to make sense. The night does not require coherence. It does not require attention. It does not require memory. You may sense that awareness itself is becoming softer, less focused on any single point, more spread out, more open. This openness does not need to be maintained. Like everything else tonight, it is allowed to come and go. The story continues, but it does not move forward in the usual way. It does not build. It does not explain. It simply remains present. If sleep arrives here, there is nothing to miss. If it does not, rest is still happening. You are not being guided toward a destination. You are being accompanied as the night deepens on its own. As this section continues, the voice will gradually make more space, space for sound, space for rhythm, space for silence. You do not need to prepare for that shift. You do not need to notice when it happens. The night knows how to move there without instruction. As the voice continues, it may begin to feel less like language and more like a steady presence, not something to follow, but something that simply remains nearby. You do not need to recognize the words anymore. They can soften into sound, into rhythm, into a gentle continuity that does not require attention. There may be moments when the voice seems far away, moments when it feels closer again. Neither distance needs to be corrected. This drifting is not a loss of focus. It is the mind releasing its need to stay oriented. You might notice that thoughts no longer arrive as complete sentences. They appear as fragments, as textures, as fleeting impressions that do not settle long enough to form meaning. There is no need to gather them, no need to understand where they came from or where they are going. The night does not ask for coherence. It does not ask for clarity. It only asks that nothing be forced. Breathing continues somewhere beneath awareness, not counted, not guided, simply present, like a quiet current moving on its own. The body feels less defined now. Edges soften, weight spreads out, no longer concentrated in any one place. You may not be able to tell exactly where one moment ends and the next begins. Time loosens, sequence fades. This is not something to notice closely. Even noticing can drift away. The voice can become part of the background, like wind or distant water, heard but not listened to, present but not tracked. If attention dissolves completely for a while, that is welcome. Nothing needs to bring it back. The story does not rely on your presence. It continues whether you are following it or not. There is nothing ahead that requires awareness, nothing important that must be received consciously. This space is intentionally simple, so simple that it does not ask to be remembered. As this section settles, words will continue to loosen. Sound will begin to matter more than meaning. And soon, even sound will begin to make room for something quieter. You do not need to anticipate that transition. You do not need to stay awake for it. The night moves there naturally, at its own pace, and you are free to move with it or to rest as it carries you forward. From here, the story no longer needs to speak in sentences. The night has already understood enough. You do not need to follow what comes next. You do not need to stay aware. You do not need to listen in any particular way. The voice has done its work. Now it can step aside. What follows is sound, not meaning, not instruction, just sound moving at its own pace. You do not need to recognize it. You do not need to understand where it comes from. You do not need to stay with it. The sound can pass through awareness the same way breath does, arriving, leaving, without asking anything in return. If attention fades, let it fade. If sleep arrives, let it arrive. Nothing is interrupted by rest. There is nothing here that requires completion, nothing that depends on your presence. The night continues, held by sound alone. You are free to rest. There is nothing else you need to do. Sometimes peace is not something we must learn. It is something we remember. The world pulls us outward, toward goals, toward noise, toward endless motion. But when the heart grows quiet, we begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath it all, a rhythm that has always been waiting, softly calling us home. This quiet home lives inside you, but it can be easy to forget. That is why Gassho exists, not to add anything new, but to help you return. A space built for stillness, for reflection, for the gentle work of being. In its name, Gassho, there is a gesture, two hands meeting in respect and gratitude, a gesture of unity between self and world, between heart and breath, between sound and silence. When you open the Gassho app, you are not entering another screen. You are stepping into a small temple that travels with you, a place where you can sit without expectation, breathe without demand, and listen without effort. Inside you will find guided meditations, stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, and the steady presence of sutras, not as lessons, but as companions. The sound you are about to hear is one of those companions, a sound carried through generations, a sound shaped by breath, devotion, and time. You do not need to understand the words. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake for it. Let the sound arrive as it is. Let it move through awareness without resistance. Let it remain even as attention fades. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. Let the breath settle. Let the body sink, and simply listen. The sound of the sutra continues, offered from a temple in the quiet mountains of Koyasan, shared here through the Gassho app whenever you wish to return to silence.